Let me start with this. The moment a narcissist realizes you don't care anymore is the moment the power shifts. Not when you argue better, not when you explain yourself perfectly, not when you finally win the fight. It shifts the second your nervous system stops chasing them, the second your heart stops begging for crumbs, the second your silence is no longer wounded, but peaceful. And that moment, it terrifies them because narcissism feeds on reaction. It feeds on your confusion. It feeds on your pain. But when you don't care anymore, the supply runs dry. When a narcissist realizes you don't care anymore, the very first thing that happens is panic. Not mild discomfort, not quiet reflection, panic. Because control is slipping through their fingers, and control is the oxygen they breathe. For so long, your reactions were proof of their power. Your tears confirmed their importance. Your arguments reassured them that they still mattered. Even your frustration was fuel. You thought you were defending yourself. They experienced it as evidence that they could still move you. And then one day, you didn't. You didn't rise to the bait. You didn't answer the late-night text. You didn't explain yourself for the 100th time. You didn't crumble. That silence, that calm, grounded, steady silence, is destabilizing to someone who survives on emotional leverage. Understand this. Narcissism is not strength. It's a fragile structure built on external validation. It looks grand on the outside, but internally it is shaky, insecure, terrified of irrelevance. When you stop reacting, you remove the mirror they use to feel significant. Imagine someone who has always known which buttons to push to make you respond. They criticize, you defend, they withdraw, you chase, they triangulate, you compete. It's predictable, it's patterned, it's control. And then suddenly, the buttons don't work anymore. They criticize, you shrug, they withdraw, you stay steady. They provoke, you stay calm. That's when the panic sets in. You may see it in subtle ways at first. They become more agitated, more persistent. They double down on little jabs, trying to get under your skin. They might accuse you of changing or being cold. What they really mean is, you're not responding the way you used to, and I don't know how to regain my footing. I once heard someone describe this moment perfectly. She said, it was like he kept throwing matches, but there was no gasoline anymore. That's what happens when you stop caring. The fire doesn't ignite, and without fire, they feel powerless. Power, to a narcissist, isn't about partnership. It's about influence. It's about knowing they can alter your emotional state at will. When that influence disappears, it exposes their deepest fear, that they are not as powerful as they believed. So they panic. And panic often looks like escalation. They may increase the drama, stir up conflict out of nowhere, manufacture emergencies. Suddenly, everything becomes urgent. Why? Because urgency forces engagement. Engagement restores control. But here's what is so powerful. When you stay regulated, when you refuse to be pulled back into the chaos, you are doing something revolutionary. You are proving to yourself that you are no longer emotionally captive. That's not indifference born from numbness. That's strength born from clarity. You are no longer trying to win their approval. You are no longer trying to prove your worth. You are no longer trying to decode their mood swings like your safety depends on it. And that shift, that internal shift, is seismic, because the moment they realize they can't control your emotions anymore, the hierarchy flips. They are no longer the emotional puppeteer. You are no longer the puppet. And in that moment, when they feel the ground wobble beneath them, when they sense their grip loosening, when they understand that their usual tactics aren't landing, that is when you know something profound has changed. Not in them, in you. When panic doesn't pull you back in, something else begins. The performance changes, the tone softens, the messages shift, and this is where so many strong, intelligent, self-aware people get pulled back into the storm, because this is where the hoovering begins. Suddenly, the person who dismissed your feelings becomes reflective. The one who never apologized now writes paragraphs about accountability. The one who called you too sensitive now says they finally understand your pain. It can feel surreal, almost cinematic, like the breakthrough you prayed for has finally arrived. You might get a late-night message that says, "I've been thinking about everything. I see where I went wrong." Or a voice note filled with trembling vulnerability, or flowers sent to your workplace, or a long email revisiting memories from the good times, the trips, the laughter, the inside jokes, and your heart does something very human in that moment. It softens because you didn't want to leave. You wanted it to work. You wanted growth. You wanted accountability. You wanted the version of them that showed up just enough to keep you hoping. Hoovering targets that hope. Understand this clearly. Hoovering is not about love. It is about access. It is about re-establishing emotional supply. When you stopped reacting, when you stopped chasing, when you became steady, you disrupted their source of validation, and now they are trying to reinsert themselves into your emotional world. It can be subtle. I miss our talks. It can be dramatic. You were the only person who ever understood me. It can be strategic. I'm in therapy now. I'm changing. But here's the question you must ask yourself, not with your heart, but with your clarity. Is this sustained change, or is this a reaction to losing control? Real transformation is quiet. It's consistent. It doesn't arrive only when you walk away. It doesn't disappear when you return. I've seen this cycle countless times. Someone leaves. The narcissist panics. They promise everything. They cry. They confess. They appear transformed. The relationship restarts. For a few weeks, maybe even a few months, things feel different. And then slowly, almost imperceptibly, the old patterns return. The subtle digs, the blame shifting, the withdrawal, the emotional volatility, and the person who went back finds themselves thinking, maybe I imagined the progress. You didn't imagine it. You experienced a temporary behavioral adjustment driven by fear, not self-awareness. Hoovering works because it speaks directly to your compassion. It speaks to the part of you that believes people can grow. And people can grow, but growth requires internal accountability, not external panic. The intensity of the Hoover can be intoxicating. It can feel like you matter again, like you're chosen again, like you've won something. But what you've really done, if you go back, is signal that dramatic gestures are enough to reset the cycle. Staying steady in the face of Hoovering is one of the most powerful acts of self-respect you will ever perform. It means you no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. You no longer mistake promises for proof. You no longer let nostalgia override reality. And yes, it can feel heartbreaking to walk away from the version of them you always hoped would stay. But that version only appeared when they were losing control, not when they felt secure in having you. You are not cruel for refusing to re-engage. You are not heartless for declining the apology that arrives only after you detach. You are protecting the progress you fought to build. Because when someone tries to hoover you back, what they are really saying is, I need you to need me again. And when you don't, that's when your healing becomes real. When the charm doesn't work, when the apologies don't land, when the nostalgic messages don't pull you back in, something darker can emerge. If hoovering fails, devaluation intensifies. And this is the part that can feel shocking, because the same person who said, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me," may now say, "You were never that important." The same person who once idealized you may suddenly rewrite history as if you were the problem all along. This is not confusion. This is ego defense. When a narcissist realizes they cannot regain control through affection, they often pivot to control through destruction. You may notice the smear campaign begin quietly. Mutual friends start acting distant. You hear whispers that you were unstable, toxic, selfish, or dramatic. Stories get twisted. Private moments get weaponized. Your vulnerabilities and the ones you shared in trust get reframed as character flaws. And it hurts. Of course it hurts. Because you're not just losing a relationship, you're watching your integrity be questioned. But understand what is happening beneath the surface. If they cannot control you privately anymore, they will attempt to control the narrative publicly. They need to protect the image. They need to preserve the illusion. In their world, someone leaving them empowered is intolerable, so they rewrite the story. They may flaunt a new relationship almost immediately. Suddenly, social media becomes a highlight reel of happiness, photos, trips, romantic captions. It can feel like a deliberate attempt to say, "Look how easily I replaced you." But that display is not about joy, it's about optics. I've seen this play out countless times. Someone finally walks away after years of emotional chaos. They find their footing, they begin to heal, And just when they start to feel stable, they hear that their ex is telling everyone they were the abusive one. The instinct is to defend yourself, to send receipts, to explain, to correct every lie. But here is the deeper truth. When someone is committed to misunderstanding you, no amount of evidence will change their version of the story. And here is the empowering part. People who know you, truly know you, will see the inconsistency. They will notice the pattern. Smear campaigns often collapse under their own exaggeration. What's crucial in this moment is that you do not internalize the projection. Projection is when someone takes their own behaviors, their own instability, their own manipulation, and assigns it to you. It is psychological displacement. And if you aren't grounded, you can start questioning yourself. Was I too sensitive? Did I overreact? Maybe I was the problem. That self-doubt is exactly what the devaluation phase is designed to trigger. But here's what you must hold on to. Your growth does not require their validation. Your truth does not require their agreement. When someone tries to destroy your reputation after you leave, what they are really exposing is their inability to tolerate rejection. Healthy people process endings with grief and reflection. Narcissistic dynamics process endings with blame and retaliation. And the most powerful response you can give is composure. Not because it's easy, not because it doesn't sting, but because your dignity matters more than winning a public argument. Over time, the noise fades. The drama exhausts itself. The people who thrive on chaos move on to new audiences. And you build something quiet and solid. Peace, stability, self-trust. Devaluation is loud, but healing is steady. And when you refuse to participate in the character assassination, when you stand firm in your integrity, when you let your life, not your rebuttal, speak for you, that is when the narrative truly shifts, not in their mouth, but in your power. There comes a moment, and if you've lived this, you know exactly what I'm talking about, when something inside you goes quiet, not defeated, not numb, just clear. The chaos that once lived in your chest like a storm suddenly settles, and in that stillness, you realize something profound. You are no longer emotionally hooked. This is where your detachment becomes your power. For so long, you were in reaction mode. Your nervous system was on high alert. You analyzed every text message. You rehearsed conversations in your head. You tried to anticipate their moods like your emotional safety depended on it, because it often did. You became hyper-aware, hyper-vigilant, constantly adjusting yourself to prevent the next blow-up, the next withdrawal, the next icy silence. And then one day, you stop adjusting. They send a passive-aggressive comment. You don't spiral. They accuse you of something that isn't true. You don't launch into a defense. They try to bait you into an argument. You feel the hook, and you don't bite. That restraint, that grounded pause, that is not weakness. That is mastery. Emotional detachment in this context is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming regulated. It's about recognizing manipulation for what it is and choosing not to participate. I remember someone once describing this shift as watching the storm from inside the house instead of standing in the rain. The storm may still be raging outside. The accusations, the drama, the chaos, it may still be happening. But you are no longer drenched in it. You are observing it. And observation changes everything. When you detach, you begin to see patterns that were invisible when you were entangled. You see how the arguments were circular by design. You see how your attempts to clarify only created more confusion. You see how empathy was used against you. And instead of asking, how do I fix this? You start asking, why was I trying to fix something that thrives on dysfunction? That question is powerful, because once you stop personalizing their behavior, you stop absorbing it. Their criticism becomes information, not identity. Their mood swings become data, not directives. Their silence becomes a tactic, not a verdict on your worth. And something extraordinary happens when you no longer internalize it. It loses its impact. They may still try, they may still provoke, but it doesn't land the same way. The words don't burrow into your self-esteem. The guilt trips don't wrap around your throat. The gaslighting doesn't make you question your sanity. Because now you trust your perception. That trust, that rebuilding of self-trust, is the foundation of your power. You stop over-explaining. You stop chasing closure from someone incapable of giving it. You stop trying to earn basic decency. And in doing so, you reclaim emotional energy you didn't even realize was being drained. Your sleep improves, your body feels lighter, you laugh more easily, you start making decisions without consulting their imaginary reaction in your head. You begin to live without bracing for impact. And that shift is visible. It's visible in your posture. It's visible in your voice. It's visible in your boundaries. Emotional detachment is not about disconnecting from humanity. It's about disconnecting from dysfunction. It's about recognizing that love does not require self-abandonment. When you detach, you are not saying, "I don't feel." You are saying, "I refuse to be manipulated." And that refusal, that is strength. Because the moment you stop playing defense in a game designed for you to lose is the moment you step off the field entirely. And that is where your real power begins. One of the most profound shifts that happens when you truly stop caring is this. They lose access to your emotional energy. And that may sound simple, but it is seismic. Because in narcissistic dynamics, your emotional energy was the currency. It didn't matter whether it was love, anger, tears, passion, fear, devotion, or frustration. It was all fuel. Every reaction you had confirmed that they could still move you, that they still mattered, that they still had influence. Think about how exhausting that was. You weren't just in a relationship. You were in a constant state of emotional output. Explaining, defending, crying, hoping, arguing, reassuring, proving, reacting. Even when you were silent, you were internally churning. Your mind replayed conversations. Your body braced for the next conflict. Your heart stayed on standby. That's not love, that's survival mode. And when you finally stop caring, not in a bitter way, not in a dramatic way, but in a grounded, regulated, "I'm done feeding this" way, the entire system starves. They send something provocative. You glance at it and move on. They try to start a fight. You don't engage. They attempt to guilt you. You don't rush to repair. The emotional supply line is cut. And what's fascinating is how quickly the dynamic loses intensity when you stop contributing energy. Arguments can't sustain themselves without two participants. Drama collapses without an audience. Chaos fizzles when it's not reinforced. I once worked with someone who said, "It was like I unplugged from a socket I didn't realize was draining me." That's exactly what happens. When you disconnect, you start conserving energy you didn't even know you were hemorrhaging. You wake up less anxious. You stop checking your phone compulsively. You stop overanalyzing every interaction. You start breathing deeper. Your nervous system begins to recalibrate. Chronic stress does something to the body. It keeps you in fight or flight. It floods you with cortisol. It convinces you that every interaction is a potential threat. But when you stop feeding the emotional roller coaster, your body finally gets the message. We are safe. That safety feels unfamiliar at first, almost boring. There's no adrenaline spike, no dramatic highs and lows, no intense reconciliations followed by devastating withdrawals, just steadiness. And if you were trauma bonded, steadiness can feel strange. But here's the truth. Peace is not boring. It's restorative. When they lose access to your emotional energy, they may try harder at first, escalate, push buttons, create situations designed to pull you back in, because they can feel the shift. They can feel that they no longer occupy your inner world the way they used to. But if you stay consistent, if you refuse to re-engage in the cycle, something powerful happens. You begin redirecting that energy into your work, into your friendships, into your health, into your passions, into yourself. Energy that once went into surviving someone now goes into rebuilding you. You start remembering who you were before the chaos, the hobbies you abandoned, the dreams you postponed, the parts of your personality that shrank to keep the peace. And slowly, you expand again. They may interpret your calm as coldness, your boundaries as cruelty, your distance as arrogance, but what it really is conservation. You are no longer available for emotional extraction. And when you stop being the emotional generator in a one-sided dynamic, you don't just weaken the hold they had on you. You strengthen the relationship you have with yourself. That is not indifference. That is reclamation. Breaking the trauma bond is the moment everything changes, not on the outside first, but inside you. And if you've ever been caught in that cycle, you know how powerful that bond can feel. It doesn't feel like logic. It feels like gravity. A trauma bond is built on intensity, high highs, crushing lows, affection followed by withdrawal, praise followed by criticism, just enough love to keep you hopeful, just enough pain to keep you destabilized. Your nervous system gets conditioned to crave the relief that comes after the chaos. You're not addicted to the person, you're addicted to the cycle. And that's why walking away isn't just a decision, it's a withdrawal. In the early days of detachment, you might still feel the pull. You might still check their social media. You might still replay the good moments in your mind like a highlight reel. You might miss them, or at least miss who you believed they could be. That doesn't mean you're weak. It means your nervous system is recalibrating. But then something shifts. The text that used to make your heart race doesn't. The silence that used to terrify you doesn't. The breadcrumb of attention that once felt like oxygen doesn't satisfy you anymore. That's not apathy. That's healing. I've heard people describe the breaking of a trauma bond as waking up from a fog. For years, they thought they were fighting for love. And then one day, they realized they were fighting for stability, for predictability, for scraps of reassurance. They weren't in love with who the person consistently was. They were attached to the intermittent reward. Intermittent reinforcement is powerful. It's the same psychological principle that keeps people pulling the lever on a slot machine. You don't win every time, but you win just enough to keep trying. And when you finally step away from the machine, when you decide you're done pulling the lever, at first it feels uncomfortable. Your hands itch. Your mind whispers, what if this time would have been different? But then you start noticing something else. You feel steadier. Your emotions aren't swinging wildly from euphoria to devastation. You're not bracing for the next mood shift. You're not walking on eggshells. Your baseline becomes calm instead of chaos. That calm can feel foreign, but it is the sign that the bond is loosening. When the trauma bond breaks, you stop romanticizing the potential and start accepting the pattern. You stop chasing the version of them that only appeared during apologies. You stop bargaining with reality. You see the whole picture, not just the highlight reel. And that clarity is powerful, because once you truly see the cycle, you can't unsee it. The illusion loses its shine. The dramatic reconciliations don't feel intoxicating anymore. They feel predictable. The apologies don't feel profound. They feel tactical. And here's the most empowering part. When the trauma bond breaks, you don't just lose attachment to them. You regain attachment to yourself. You start trusting your instincts again. You start honoring your discomfort instead of overriding it. You start choosing peace over intensity, stability over spectacle, consistency over chemistry. They may feel the rupture when the bond breaks. They may sense that you're no longer emotionally tethered, but what they feel is loss of access. What you feel is freedom. And freedom is quiet. It doesn't scream. It doesn't perform. It simply stands firm and says, I will not abandon myself again. That is the moment you are no longer surviving the cycle. You have stepped out of it. And once you step out, you don't go back.